All right, speaking of JC and ECU baseball, we welcome in the great Coach O, Dr. Gary Overton, into the Pirate Radio studios to talk some baseball. And if we have time, maybe some Washington Commanders football, as Coach O, a fellow Washington fan like myself. But, Coach, I really appreciate your time. How you doing today?
Really good. Thanks so much, Cliff.
And it is a time where some Pirate fans need to be talked off the ledge, Coach. 5 straight losses. I will say that Cliff Godwin, Austin Knight, and then JC and Dixon have all been on Pirate Radio this week and have done a good job of talking to me and others off the ledge. Seems like it's business as usual there. They are not panicking. They are not worried about where they are right now. In fact, they say they're in a good spot and kind of looking at the big picture of things. It seems like they're ready to get back on the field and get some wins this weekend.
Yeah, and after a loss, the getting back on the field as quick as possible is a remedy for whatever the ailment is. But you're exactly right. They go about it as business as usual, and these Pirates will not miss a beat. They'll find their way back home. There's no question about that. In competitive sports, those kind of things are going to happen. Who would have thought 2 years ago, after the Pirates dropped 3 games to open the season against Bryant, that they would finish the year with 22 straight wins?
Nobody, to answer your question. And you're right. Well said. Competitive sports, these things happen. Can you take us back to your coaching days, Coach, and when you experience a series loss and maybe a 4 or 5 game losing streak? The message has to stay consistent, right? So what do you say to your team when you're in one of those slumps?
Well, you focus on the big picture. And what the Pirates have coming up is the chance to win the regular season crown and then move on to Clearwater and hopefully win the conference tournament there. And regardless of either of the two, the Pirates are going to postseason play. They will play in the NCAAs and to play also for a host spot.
How important is it? And obviously important, but last year when we were playing in Charlottesville, we all thought, man, it'd be nice if this was in Greenville. This is going to be tough to get by that top seed. So how important is it for the Pirates to finish strong and get those games here at home?
It's very important. There's no substitute really for playing in front of your home crowd. The field that you practice on and play on all year is to your advantage, but that crowd is just something else. And to play in front of the Pirate crowd, even more so.
Cliff talked about earlier this week, he doesn't think top 8 is out of the question for this team. So some things have to go right, not only for the Pirates, but also go wrong for others. But as you look at that big picture, Coach O, do you still see a top 8 as a potential possibility out there?
There is a possibility, certainly so. The Pirates will need a little help. There's no question about that. But at the same time, that's been given by both the Pirates and the opponents throughout the year. So a lot of baseball is still to be played, not just the end of the regular season, but the conference tournaments all across the country. And then, of course, we see how it all plays out.
Looking at RPI right now, East Carolina sitting at 12, according to NCAA.com. And, Coach, as you look at this, who are some teams you're watching this last weekend of the regular season and in the conference tournaments? Who are you keeping an eye on, kind of scoreboard watching, that maybe if things go south for them, it could directly help East Carolina?
Well, first of all, an advantage that ECU has is that there are only so many SEC teams that can go. I mean, if there are 5 teams up there in the mix, it's going to be really hard for that committee to put 5 teams into hosting spots I'm talking about. And in the 16, that really doesn't matter. I mean, those that are deserving are deserving. At the same time, the clubs you ask about, an eye on Alabama, an eye on Oregon State, and a sharp eye on Oklahoma, because there's not a West Coast team up in the top echelon, nor is there a Big 12 club. So I think Oklahoma and Oregon State deserve a quick look.
Yeah, and you've kept an eye on Oregon State. You were out in Corvallis for a while. What was that, a couple years ago now?
Yes.
I also saw an Indiana State. So outside of the SEC and ACC, the 2 teams that are up there as far as RPI right now are Indiana State and East Carolina. We saw Indiana State host a regional last year year, right? So how about the non-SEC and ACC teams? You mentioned the Big 12's Oklahoma there, but I see UC Santa Barbara in the top 15. Like, any chance for any other outsiders to maybe host a regional this year?
Well, you referred to them as outsiders, and some people call them mid-majors, but really the NCAA committee really likes to see non-Power 5 schools or Power 5 programs get into the mix to create a balance, and also good for the game.
Yeah.
Look at the teams that have been to the College World Series that were so-called no-names, like Stony Brook a few years ago. I wouldn't call them, I use the term no-names, but really in terms of higher echelon of college baseball. Oral Roberts last year. Yeah. And at the same time, they like to see teams get into that, and not a real monopoly by conferences like the SEC and the ACC.
So you don't think there is a bias? I mean, you've been a part of these discussions, right? So if a team is worthy, it doesn't matter what conference they're in. Now, obviously, you look at it from a strength of schedule standpoint and things like that, but you say the committee doesn't mind giving these teams a home game in a regional.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And there was a time many years ago where the bid process was a part of it, but not anymore. If a team is deserving, they will host and they will get that regional bid.
If you got a question for Coach O, please get it in. I'd love to throw it to him, and Jamie's got a couple here for you. While we're talking about other teams, here's a good one, Coach. Besides East Carolina, who is the best team in the state of North Carolina this year?
Well, Jamie, that's a great question. If you look at RPI alone or statistics, I think you would probably have to say North Carolina, but I'm not sure that's the answer, because ECU owns the series against the Tar Heels this year. Wake Forest, certainly with Chase Burns, has to be an item to discuss. And we just saw Duke play in here Tuesday night of last week. Certainly a good club with a great bullpen.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Coach. And maybe I'm a novice here, but I saw Duke ECU. Okay, let's light up the scoreboard with runs. That was not the case. Credit to ECU's pitching in that matchup, but I was really surprised by Duke's pitching. Should I not have been surprised by that?
No, we knew they had arms, and we knew they had good arms. Some of them struggle with throwing strikes, but they did not on that particular evening. And yet the arm strength that we saw, I think, caught everyone by a little bit of a surprise, just by the numbers, the quantity of those arms.
Ken Watlington joined us earlier in the show from Channel 9, proud UNCW alum. Where does his team get a talk in that best in NC conversation? Because they've had a really good year, Coach.
Really good year, and they're a team that is teetering on an at-large bid. Many think that they may even, should they not win the Coastal Tournament, maybe a 3 seed somewhere. And with that being said, yes, it's been a really good year for the Seahawks, but I'm not sure that they factor into
the
one of the best teams in the. And I'll go back to Jamie's question. And Jamie, I think when you put ECU, UNC, and Wake Forest together, I think one of those three teams come out as the winner.
All right, and NC State right on the outside looking in there?
Correct.
Yeah. We've got Gary Overton joining us inside the Pirate Radio studios. Any other teams from the state of North Carolina going to be playing postseason baseball? So Campbell's had a down year for their standards, Coach O. I've seen UNC Greensboro in some fields. Now that's going to come down to conference tournaments too, right? Who can win their conference tournaments? So who are some other North Carolina teams we could see in?
I hate to refute what you just said, Clip, but at the same time, UNCG, not in the same boat as UNCW, but teetering on getting a large bid. They're in the range where they'll be in the discussion, or as we used to like to say in the committee room, they'll be on the board.
Okay.
UNC Wilmington, UNCG, and of course the teams in the ACC as well as ECU.
Okay. And those are the teams we'll see a lot from the Carolinas when we send it down to South Carolina as well that we could see in. In fact, the latest Baseball America regional projection had Coastal coming here, which am I right to say for their standards they've been kind of down this year?
A little bit.
Yeah.
They've struggled at the end of the season. It's really been a tough row for them here at the end. You mentioned Coastal. Don't forget College of Charleston. We all know about Clemson, South Carolina. So when you throw in that state in the Carolinas, it seems like 20% of the field may be from those two states.
Wow. Coach O, Dr. Gary Overton joining us. We'll take a break. We'll have Coach O here for another segment. We'll move on with Dr. Gary Overton here for one more segment inside the Pirate Radio studios. Not a question, Coach, but Johnny Robertson, we call him Johnny Stats. He always gives us some great stats. He says, in the past 7 seasons, 55 of the 56 teams that earned a top 8 seed were from the SEC, ACC, Big 12, and Pac-10, Pac-12. The lone exception, I think we all know, would be East Carolina. He says they were with East Carolina in 2022. He says they were number 10 in D1 and number 12 in the RPI. So 55 of the 56 that earned a top 8 the past 7 seasons have been SEC, ACC, Big 12, or Pac-12.
Yeah, really good stat there. And that win streak had a lot to do with it, as well as the conference championship, regular season, and tournament. But to end the season the way it did, that played into ECU getting that and not being in the top 8 RPI-wise. But at the same time, the NCAA likes to see those kind of teams in. And
Coach O, we talked about some of the maybe surprise teams making it, not just hosting a regional, but those upset teams that get there and get to a super and get to Omaha. He says a number 3 or number 4 seed has made the College World Series each of the last 5 years.
Wow.
So if you don't get a top seed or even a top 2 in your regional, don't fret. You could make the College World Series.
Absolutely.
We talk about it in March all the time with the upsets in the NCAA tournament, but don't focus on it as much with baseball, but it does happen. So
yeah, really good stats there and interesting fodder.
All right, Coach, we've got a question about Chris Kaler from Jamie. He says, it seems like to him, Chris Kaler's routine has been slowed down. Have you noticed it? Do you have any thoughts on it? He said he likes a faster routine. So, Coach, have you noticed any slowing down from Kaler?
The speed of his delivery was really effective throughout most of the year. And if you look closely, Chris is not a hard thrower. We all know that. And he throws a lot of strikes, and he gets quick counts in his favor. He also gets quick outs. But at the same time, he has a tough time going past the first time through the order. And in so doing, people are starting to make adjustments to him in that first time of the order, and he's being more careful, really not slower, but just a little more careful in his approach.
A little more deliberate. So good observation by Jamie, and good answer from Coach. Coach, how about we talk about all these great teams here locally? How about, and we have the Keith LeClaire Classic, which is an amazing event and hopefully will go on forever because we love it around these parts. But what about a Carolinas Classic? Maybe you get some of the best teams because there's so many great teams, and we see them during the midweek and some on weekend series. But how about an early February or March get together in Raleigh or Charlotte or somewhere with the state's best teams facing off? Do you like the idea of that event, and could it be possible to do something like that?
Not only do I like it, I think fans like it even more, and it would be a great idea. Just the problems that exist would be that there are only so many weekends, and that the ECUs and the UNCs like to play each other. That'll continue. As we go along, though, a big tournament like that has to fit into everyone's weekend, and that also could be a problem. But at the same time, it's something that should be discussed, and it possibly could get hammered out one day.
Well, if you're a coach, would you rather have the North Carolina series like it is, one home, one away, one neutral, or would you rather sprinkle in midweeks throughout the year?
Really like that 3-game set early in the year because you get to play them 3 times. And like this year, ECU was the series winner, and you'll have one each year.
And you get to also set up your arms that way, too, and not have to worry about some of the midweek madness that comes along, right?
Well, your better arms.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Gary Overton joining us. Coach O, let's talk about this East Carolina team. We saw Wyatt Lunsford-Shinkman back on the mound for ECU. Still waiting Zach Root. When you got an idea on maybe when we could see Zach Root back out there?
No, just like all concerned listeners, and that is that we want him back as soon as possible. We hear that he's close. We don't know. At the same time, Lunsford-Shinkman did get in an inning at Tulane. Hopefully, he can prepare for more than that as we go along. But when you're dealing with injuries, there has to be a lot of care, and there has to be a lot of focus on that care. So just not to expect too much too quick.
Yeah. How about Danny Beal? There's always a guy on East Carolina that has that Danny Beal role, whether it be a Garrett Saylor, just your innings eater, but also a very, very good pitcher that you count on. But Danny has been that for the Pirates this year. And, man, we saw him go out there on Sunday. And just it sounds like, Coach, their directive is go get us 3 outs, and then we'll worry about the next inning after that. And you keep stacking 3 outs, you're going to be in there 4 or 5 innings.
Exactly. The longer, the better. And it seems like ECU has someone surface at the end of the year for several years now. You mentioned Saylor, great example, and of course Danny Beal this year. But Danny also has been a late addition to the Pirate Club each year that he's been here. Actually, ended up starting the Texas game that
That's right,
the Pirates lost in Game 3 of the Super Regional.
As you see potential for that now, maybe as with Jake Hunter out, with Rude not being fully back, we could see him back in a starter's role.
Certainly moving in that direction, but to go, 5+ or even 6, I think on the weekend, threw in all 3 games as well.
And we'll see him at some point against Rice, I would imagine. Coach O, who asked Patrick Mason this, I'll get your take on it. Every year we also see a Pirate bat head off into the stratosphere late in the year, whether it be Worrell, whether it be Jake Washer. There's a lot of examples of this. Who are the candidates this year for ECU, in your opinion, to get hot here late?
Well, there have been Pirates that have had great years, or a great year from start to finish. I mean, we could go through, we could talk a lot about Cunningham, even Wilcoxon. You look at what Riley Johnson's done, and as the season progresses, you're going to have injuries. You're going to have fatigue, especially freshmen. A guy like Bristol Carter, I'm sure, is going through a little bit of that now. Hasn't played 56 games in the past. But who's the guy that could evolve? I'll say Jacob Starling, because of the injury situation earlier that he's now recovered and he's rested.
Yeah, that was actually my pick. 2 great brains here, Coach.
Yes.
Probably scary for you that I had that same answer, but I'm glad for myself that you had that answer. So the Star Man could get hot here. He likes the flair for the dramatic, and hopefully gets hot at the right time for the Pirates. When it comes to the bats, Coach O, health-wise, are we doing pretty good there? Behind the plate, Wilcoxon, how do you like the way they've been able to get McChrystal in a little bit to save some health with Wilcoxon? But both of those guys have gotten a lot of at-bats this year.
A lot of at-bats. Now, Wilcoxon has done the majority of the pitching, and the factors that we mentioned just earlier, fatigue as well as injuries settling in. We all know that Riley Johnson has played hurt all year, and in so doing, those are factors as to who will emerge or who can emerge. But the health, I think, other than the Riley Johnson issue, I think Pirates are fine.
There was some concerns heading into the season defensively for some people I've talked to, especially moving Dixon Williams over to third, not his natural position. He's done pretty good over there, I think. How about this team? Because a staple of Cliff Godwin baseball is good defense. How has this 2024 team look defensively in your eyes?
Well, it's like Cliff says, defense is something that you can control, and it's really good-looking club. As you mentioned, the concerns were the arm strengths of both Barini and Dixon Williams. Never was the issue of catching the baseball or either of the two with their range, and both have surpassed that.
Yeah.
I even think that Barini's arm strength is a little better than we all anticipated it being, and Dixon Williams plays the game like a third baseman should. He plays it quick, he plays it fast, and he's been very adept at it.
Coach O, Dr. Gary Overton joining us inside the Pirate Radio studios. Couple minutes left to go with Coach O. Do you like where this team is sitting right now, Coach? Cliff Godwin put it this way. You got, we played 14 weeks. We've had one bad one. So, as I said, it's not a good time to have 5 straight losses. But then again, is it ever a good time to have 5 straight losses?
Not at all. And it's a fun team to watch. And they have been fun all year. Now, to ask Carter Cunningham to stay as hot as he has been all year, that's a tall task and a tall order. But it's just a good brand of baseball that the Pirates have put on the field. You mentioned defense. I really like to talk about base running because nobody does that better than ECU. It's taught. It's instilled in their game. They always go first to third, second to home, and it has scored and developed a lot of runs for the Pirates all year. Coach O joining us inside the Pirate Radio studios. We'll be on the call with Scooter coming up the next 3 days. Great team. I love when you call him Scotty. Yeah. Good point, Scotty. Good. And I love listening to you guys and looking forward to this weekend against Rice. Coach, what are your thoughts on Washington as we get into the off season here? Well, Jaden Daniels, new quarterback. Dan Quinn, new coach. Yeah, new players in from the draft. I know the pundits seem to think that it was better than a good draft, that it even could be called exceptional later on. But I think fans of the Commanders have to be excited about that. And also, the offseason has been good. It's been really good, and future looks bright. All right, Coach. Well, that makes me excited that you're excited. So we'll see what happens there. We'll try to track you down later on this baseball season, although will you be heading off to a regional this year? Yeah, hope so, and we'll learn that in about a week or at the end of the Clearwater tournament. And real quick, Coach, when you go on these regional sites, what are your duties there? Well, you actually are the NCAA of that regional. In other words, you're the last decision maker on. There's a procedure, and you have to outline that procedure, and the clubs have to follow it. But as decisions come up, whether it be rain or moving of batting practice, we could go on and on. Gotcha. So many, but you're the decision maker in that case. The man in charge, Coach Dr. Gary Overton. Good stuff, Coach. Well, we'll keep in touch and try to talk more baseball with you this season. Thanks so much, Clip. Thanks as always, Coach. We appreciate it, and our listeners really enjoy it. So thank you so much.